morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to another HR Today educational podcast. This is the second in our series on sort of simplifying the world of technology. This is our Understand This podcast series, where we're going to look at technology not from the standpoint of a deep discussion of all the various technical terms and technobabble, but real-world examples of how technology has been deployed successfully. We are doing the second of a two-part segment. We are joined again today by Noelle Paras, the Senior Vice President of Client Services for Sevenstep. For those of you who caught her electrifying first performance, Noelle has been with Sevenstep for about 13 years, starting as a recruiter and working her way up. So she really understands the recruiting industry and the RPO industry at every level, starting as a recruiter, as I said, all the way up to SVP for Client Services. Noelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Elliot. Happy to be here.
That's great. Well, we're happy to have you back. Sevenstep, of course, is a total talent solutions and RPO solutions provider, one of the top rated by HRO Today on our Baker's Dozen. And Sevenstep is an organization that specializes in hard-to-fill jobs. And today we're going to be once again doing the second in a two-part series on a hard-to-fill scenario. We're talking about one of the nation's largest retail and healthcare service providers. And Noelle, as I joked before, the electrifying performance, was on in our first segment talking about the massive rollout for vaccines. Today we're going to be talking about a different problem that this organization faced. And we're going to start off by, once again, staging and understanding what the problem was. So, Noelle, tell us a little bit about this organization, and the challenge that they faced in their recruiting and what the data sources that you were trying to look at using the Sevayo predictive analytics tool and data analytics tool that's proprietary to Sevenstep. But tell us about what things looked like before you began using the tool and what the objectives and goals were set at the time you began to use this solution. So bring us up to speed what the state looked like before you guys started making some of the changes and adaptations that were suggested by the data analytics.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. So, as you said, the example today is really with a massive healthcare provider. Sevenstep does anywhere between, I would say, 5,000 and 8,000 clinical and professional services hires a year for them. So we're doing quite a bit and working really, really closely with them. I think in a post-2020 world, the healthcare talent landscape just seems to be in constant flux and incredibly unpredictable. Specifically, for those who are working on the front lines, the candidate marketplace has really changed. We're seeing folks who are floating between temp and perm quite often, whereas in the past, typically if you sat in one type of employment classification, you'd stay there for a bit. And it's really prevalent specifically in the healthcare space today, as it is in many industries. But I think the biggest challenge that our client was facing in the past 1 or 2 years, I'd say, is just the lack of visibility to the data across their entire total talent landscape, as well as the confidence in the data that they were receiving. So receiving data from multiple different inputs that don't all maybe speak the same language, really challenging to compare apples and oranges, in these examples, and really hard to make informed decisions with the inability to see across all of this information in a way that's really just clear, transparent, and, provides a way that you can make some smart business decisions. And so this client in particular was faced with rapidly changing needs, rapidly changing candidate marketplace, lack of clear supply and demand information, and going back to the point I just made, a lack of visibility and confidence because the data is so much, it just becomes overwhelming and confusing. And so we really saw slow or unclear decision making. We saw longer time to fill really critical roles. We saw some lower satisfaction, both from candidates, hiring managers, and we saw a vacancy gap of critical open positions that was not being closed quickly enough.
So, Noelle, as you looked at all of those parameters, and obviously it sounded like a bit of a mess, then you found all these different flagging areas. So once you got under the hood and really understood what the problems were and what was causing them, What did Sevenstep and the client do to sort of improve the outcome?
So we really leaned into our data analytics platform, Sevayo Insights. Our client actually has licenses to this program, so they are able to go in and access all of their data really anytime that they want. But this is a data aggregator that brings multiple systems together to show your talent landscape all in one place. So from your candidate relationship management tool, your CRM, to your HRIS system, to your applicant tracking system, to your VMS, to candidate marketplace intelligence, we are able to bring all of these different pieces of complex data together in one place so you can actually view your entire talent ecosystem from perm to contingent to internal employee data to exit data and really better map your recruitment and your workforce planning strategy. So I'm actually going to start at the end and share what happened, and then I'll get into the how. After implementing this analytics tool and really having it sort of infiltrate every aspect of our work, we were able to see some really incredible improvement. We saw a 15% improvement in HREX, a 42% improvement in candidate quality, a 12-day improvement in time to fill, and a 5-point increase in NPS satisfaction scores from hiring managers. So the first thing that we did was we analyzed the historical data to help separate out the averages from the outliers. And we quickly were able to see that there was a particular group of clinical requisitions which were driving all of the averages up. So by separating those out and looking at them separately, we were able to take different actions that were much more efficient and effective. And we used predictive analytics to tell us what to do. I think sometimes predictive analytics can really seem like buzzwords. So let me just take a quick moment and I'll explain that. What I mean by predictive analytics is that we were able to go back to about 10 years of historical data for each role in each geography and then predict almost down to the day when that role would either fail or age. We could predict offer declines, low ad response, and perform compensation analysis. With that, we were able to predict the exact number of qualified candidates you need to successfully fill a role. And we could predict on what day you would need to have them in front of a hiring manager in order to successfully fill that position on time. So we could predict exactly how many recruiters, sourcers, and coordinators would be required based on the forecasted volume. And we could prepare to quickly scale if the volumes fluctuated because we already knew exactly what we needed. By being this precise, it actually allowed us a great amount of agility when the forecasts change, which, let me tell you, happens constantly, and that's okay. And then the other area we were able to predict was the hiring manager burden. I think quite often we forget about them. You know, when we're going through an unforecasted peak in volume, we think about staffing your TA team, getting your sourcing right, getting your advertising set, but we don't always prepare our hiring managers for the amount of time and energy that will be required of them in order to achieve their goals. And so we were able to bring that forward as well to say, prepare yourself for this amount of interviews, this many hours, these feedback sessions, these intake calls, and we really were able to provide sort of a well-rounded example of what this might look or feel like. And so from there, we did the predictive analytics exercise. We used that data to tell us what to do and how many resources to do it with. And so at this point, we were really starting to build that confidence. We were building the confidence with the business. So we had that one piece working in the right direction. Then we started to focus on the visibility. We started to utilize pretty sophisticated visualizations that our client really needed. And the visualizations in our data suite provide clear views into what's happening to empower the clients to make better decisions. Again, I'm using a lot of buzzwords, so let me get into some examples. This client in particular is really focused on improving their diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we worked with them to build custom dashboards that they had access to, again, on a daily basis, where they could see how their candidate population was progressing through each of their processes. And we mapped that against their corporate goals so that they could easily track and also report out on all of their initiatives. So as an example, let's say They were hitting their goals from an attraction standpoint, so the number of applicants that were coming through, and hitting their goals from a presentation standpoint, number of candidates who are presented to hiring managers. But then we realized that there was a drop-off in certain areas after interview stage. And so it was an opportunity for us to then work with our client and review the interview process and the interview panels and make some recommendations for potentially more equitable adjustments. And so by being able to look at this data in such a granular way, we were able to pinpoint exactly where to pivot and reduce a lot of waste by not pivoting in the wrong areas. And so in one specific quarter last year, we saw 42% of all hires were people of color, 8% of all hires were veterans and or individuals with disabilities, which both were improvements on previous quarters. And so that's one specific example of just using the sophisticated visualizations and how they can really help to drive change in an organization. But more generally, our visualizations showed the executive how recruitment was working against their forecasts, their corporate initiatives, and their goals. So to wrap us up here, we were able to pinpoint pockets of potential failure. So we could work with our client to pivot where we needed to, gave them very clear insight into results before we were done recruiting. So quite frankly, before it was too late. Too often, I think we start talking about edits to strategy where we're too late in the recruitment cycle and aging of that position is unavoidable. So to bring us back all the way to the beginning, I think the main drivers of success in using the Sevayo Insights platform were that we were able to provide both that visibility, but also the confidence that our client needed in a moment of real uncertainty to be able to make the business decisions that they needed to really help them achieve their goals.
Well, it is interesting because part of what you suggested here is that you've also sort of recreated the entire supply chain. I think one of the things most people don't think about is manager resources. Mm-hmm. Making sure that if a hiring manager was going to have 43 people to interview in a week, that wasn't going to work. Most times people rethink strategy, let's be honest, in talent acquisition, is at the point of failure, right? So everyone enters into a strategy and then they begin to, at the point of failure, figure out what to do next. What you're saying is that you were able to sort of see those coming much more effectively. And as I asked you on our first podcast, what surprised you? What was it you went into and you said, okay, everything based on what was then the current state at the start of this effort to improve diversity and improve velocity of hiring, you said, okay, that part's okay. And then it turned out when you got all the data sources in, the client went, wow, the kids are not okay. That they sort of were shocked when they actually were able to turn all of these data feeds into information. Was there any moment at which, that you and the client turned around and said, wait a minute, that is a problem with it we didn't see coming?
Yes, I would say prior to going through this moment of heavy analysis, we and our client felt like it was always a sourcing issue. If your requisition is aged and you're not getting your position filled on time, it must be the top of the funnel. And what we were able to learn through this process is that was not actually the case. In most instances, we either had enough source candidates that had turned into leads or we had enough applicants to fill the role very early on. What was happening is those candidates were not making it through the process and through to interview fast enough to close the requisition out quickly. And so we were able to pinpoint the exact moment in the process where we needed to put some energy, put some resources, and fix some things and provide some solutions. But it was not just the beginning and the top of the funnel that I think a lot of us point to at the beginning when we think there's a problem.
Well, yeah, everyone thinks more candidates solves the problem, but I've certainly been involved in my career in instances, and I'm sure people in our audience have, where, the hiring manager say, well, I don't have enough candidates, but you say, well, could you respond to the 26 that are in your folder waiting for review, right? So it is, often you see things more clearly when you have the data, and it's represented in a way that's easy to digest. Great examples. The improvement numbers are pretty surprising. Okay, could you run through those again, the NPS and other statistics, just for the benefit of our audience, because this is what is possible if technology is properly deployed.
I'd love to. 15% improvement in age requisitions, a 42% improvement in candidate quality, a 12-day improvement in the time to fill, and a 5-point increase in NPS satisfaction scores from hiring leaders.
That's awesome. So just for the people in the audience, 12-day improvement in time to fill is enough time to get away to the Caribbean or Hawaii and get back. So don't underestimate the Noelle's going, I didn't think of that. Don't underestimate the importance of time, okay? So to our audience, these are some great examples. And we're trying not to use some of the techno speak. This is a large-scale organization, with really large-scale complex hiring needs across, diverse geographies and several different job families, all of them hard to fill in healthcare. And this is the kind of results that are possible, okay? The Understand This podcast series is not about decrying technology. It's about decrying the way we talk about technology. Technology is a great and important part of any HR infrastructure, but you have to be able to understand how to use it. That's what we're trying to do, is demystify it. I want to thank Noelle Paras for coming back for a second, and once again, Noelle, electrifying stint on the HR Today educational podcast. Noelle is the Senior Vice President for Client Services at Sevenstep, one of the leading RPO providers. Thanks, Noelle. We may have you back again, though.
Thanks so much, Elliot.
And to our audience, thank you for your time and attention. We hope you learned some things and are thinking about technology a little bit differently. And we hope these real-world examples and some of the data points that Noelle just covered are useful to you in your everyday problem-solving needs. Thanks again, and we'll look forward to having you join us on our next HR Today educational podcast.